a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this incredibly cool episode, Steve Falconer comes back to talk to us all about Quicksilver, Christos Oil, Santa Claus, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and Spalooja. So it's a fantastic episode. He does a whole video presentation, guys, so I highly recommend the video version of this, link down in the show description. Absolutely ad-free over there and completely free on Patreon. But if you would like to sign up to support your favorite show here in the Afterthought, first of all, thank you, of course. I mean, because this is a vibe. Secondly, the Afterthought for this particular one, we go all about geoarchitecture, star forts, bells, crop circles, and all kinds of cool shit, guys. So, like 12 episodes in one for the damn thing. Great way to support your favorite show. Thank you again in advance. But for now, let's just get to this badass conversation. So again, recommend the video version, guys. Check that out down below if you're an audio-only listener. If you're a video version person, thank you for your patience on me explaining that to the audio-only listeners, because this is a community and it's a safe place to learn and grow. But without any further ado, let's find out what the world is coming to with Steve Falconer. Steve Falconer, welcome back. Dude, so cool to see you. We're going to get right to this one, guys. So all the ways to find him linked down in the show description, episode 295, where he was first made his beautiful appearance over here and got us all hooked on tissue salts, which we are an elated fans, gratitude fans of the users of, and also his Spacebusters. All the things, guys, linked down below. Steve, it's so cool to see you, man. We're having a quick turnaround here to bring you back. You and I are, and I'm going to reduce this, I'm going to have you add the class to it for us, though, but you and I are going to discuss jizz.
Yeah, pretty much. Semen, or as the Catholic priests call it, seminaries. And we'll get into what that's all about, yeah.
I knew you'd class it up, and I really appreciate that, sir. Well, if you'd like, we have already, been introduced here, so we can absolutely get right into this thing, guys. Again, for all the introductions and things, check out episode 295, as well as all the other ways to explore this beautiful man down in the show description. He does some really cool shit. Go check it out. Steve, where would you like to start, man?
Well, I think what we talked about, we're going to start with what's called the Christos Oil, or what people call Kundalini rising. I never really talk about this. And this is we're going to let you in on the big fucking secret. What is it? The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, what do they know? The Vatican, what do they know that we don't know? And what are they hiding from us? And it is this. Now, we're going to be reading from this book today. Can you see it?
Book of Wisdom.
And this is not my material, and this is not his material in here either. It's written by a guy called Harry B. Joseph, and I'm going to plug the book because I can't recommend it enough. And if you buy it, it's not cheap, but it comes with a digital version. And so I'm going to use that today because the graphics are like, it's already set up perfect. It's great. And I use this. I'm initiating my 18-year-old son into the mystery schools. And I'm using this as the first book. If you're homeschooling, this is great. But I have to first start by saying, and we'll get into this, the reason that the ancients hid this, and you don't just tell this to a 7-year-old child, is because we're going to talk about things today that you need to be completely balanced in all three centers, mind, heart, and physical, before you get into this, you don't just tell a 7-year-old child, don't jizz and women are going to kill you. Like you can't heal a certain side of you until you've experienced it. Everyone does need to go out and have a good, healthy, sexual, prodigal thing with some sex and some experimental things in this. Otherwise, you'll get what you'll see in Christianity, where they make the woman, they blame it all on Eve, right? Which is a metaphor. So the reason they hid this is because you don't just teach this to a 7-year-old. You have to go out and sow your oats, so to speak. Otherwise, you'll get into what we are going to get into soon, which is called toxic spirituality, which is just as bad as toxic physicality, where you think, oh, you're a monkey on a spinning ball. You need to be balanced before you know what to heal. If you heal one part of yourself and other parts are suffering, you end up doing what these priests are doing, which are holding black masses and shagging prostitutes. And we'll get into what this is all about. So this is why they did hide it from people. You don't just come full in on this knowledge, or else you can become unbalanced from the center path, which we'll get into. You can go too far to the one path or too far to the other. But we're jumping the gun a little bit. So what we're going to do, you want to talk about what's called the cerebrospinal fluid, or the Christos oil, arising the chrism, or the Christ. And that's what we'll do. Yeah, I'll let you bounce off and then we can go into it.
Absolutely fascinating. This already, guys, is one of my favorite things to talk about with you, because it's this deeper knowledge that now that we have the understandings that we do, we can take the training wheels off and let's get real about some shit. And I love that you bring this to the table. And also want to mention that signing up for your favorite show down in the link below will get you access to the Afterthought, where we are going to talk about his background and the sacred geometry and the people that he is working with in the sacred geometry, electroculture type things. Guys, definitely going to want to check this thing out. We're going to talk more about his
the after show is going to be great, because I've met some people recently who, you can see the picture behind me, who have figured out what all of these gardens are, these little maze gardens, and what those buildings behind me are all about. So yeah, it's going to get
obsessed, absolutely obsessed. But for the Kundalini Christ Oil, this is so important. So again, guys, you come here and you get multiple shows when you talk to Steve. It's like 37 topics in one, and they're all phenomenally impacting and absolutely empowering. So Steve,
and I would recommend, if you didn't see our last show together, I do recommend you go watch the last show on the Zodiac that we did, because it will tie into this, and we're not going to have time to go recover that. So I'll cover a little bit of it, but there's going to be stuff we're talking about that I'm assuming you saw what we talked about last.
Exactly. And guys, it's linked down in the show notes, so it'll be very easy to find. Go check it out.
And if my hands disappear, I'm on green screen. I'm not a ghost.
I'm real.
Yeah. So if you want, I'll just share screen and we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, man, let's roll it.
And I am retarded desktop. Here we go.
It'll give us a good time to let the audio only audience know to go ahead and check the link for the video version of this down in the show description. It's found for absolute free many places. So you guys check that thing out. Definitely going to want to join Steve and I on this journey.
Okay. It says you are screen sharing. So do you see my screen or what?
Yes, sir.
The full thing, right?
Yes. Okay. Sir. Your full desktop. Absolutely organized, and in no way reveals a Virgo is using it.
Yeah, we'll get into that too. And before we get into that, before we get into what this is all about, and this is coming again from this book of wisdom here, and I'll show you links at the end where to get this. If you're a religious person who takes religion literally, all this literally, which is by design, by the way, as I was just talking about, the reason that they use typology and metaphor and layers of metaphor like an onion is because this information is very dangerous to someone who doesn't have a full understanding of themselves and spirituality and what's going on. So they made it so that there were these stories, which are based on semi-real events, just the wrong times and places and characters, because they don't want you to understand this unless you're ready for it. Because as we're going to see later with the Ahrimans versus Luciferians versus the Christed people, it's dangerous when you get this information and you're not a balanced person. You can use it against people, right? So just before we get into this, Genesis 1:3 says, "Let there be light." So we live inside a light wave universe where all things are created out of light. Low vibrating light turns into matter. High vibrating matter turns into black light. I think I can make this bigger, actually. Hold on. No, that was better before, wasn't it? Hold on. That's better, isn't it? But I can stretch this. That's better. Can you see that better?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. So Walter Russell said, God is the thinking mind, or the white magnetic light, right? It's the substance of body. God is light, the one universal substance. So if you open Black's Law Dictionary, the definition of human in the legal thing is a sea monster. So when we all go around saying, I know my rights, I have human rights, right? I have human rights. Well, under their law, human rights means you're a sea monster. And because they're under maritime law, they mean that you're an enemy of the rest of us and you need to be governed, right? So the real word human comes from human, Hueman, which means we are the colored light spectrum. We are an attribute of color that permits to be the class of that specified color. Each individual is the mind, not the physical body. We are both entwined. Without the mind, the physical body or world would cease to exist. And the same without the sun. This is where sun worship comes from. If there were no sun, you would see no colors or light. So now you understand where sun worship. The mind is what we call spirit. The mind is the intellect that manipulates the physical body and the world around us. It's just a frequency tuner. When you're driving in your car, right, listen to the radio. We were just listening to some tunes. All of those radio stations are coming through your car all the time, but your crystal tuner is just tuned into 93.7 FM, this and that. Just because your stereo's tuned to 97 point whatever FM doesn't make the other 75 radio stations not coming through your car. They're all there. And that's us. So the mind exists within what we call the mental plane, which is shared between all the minds of reality. So thoughts are not created by you. We're told in school that your brain is just making random thoughts. That's not true. Your brain is a receiver, and so is your heart. You can tune your brain like a radio, like a car radio, to pick up the ones you want and discard the ones you don't want. So they're not created by you. They are created by frequency of what your mind is set to. If your mind is set to a specific topic, like generating wealth, this is where all this manifestation comes from. What a man thinks, he becomes. That's the old saying. Then we tune into that frequency into the mental plane from the physical. So we tune our brain from the physical plane through the etheric plane into the third mental plane. And we start saying, I want to receive these thoughts because this is what my spirit wants. If you're just walking around in a daze all the time, unconscious, you start getting bleeding from all the radio stations because it doesn't know what you want because you didn't tell it. You see, your brain actually works for you. You don't work for your brain. But we're not taught any of this. This is the big fucking secret, right? This is what manifestation does. I started doing mantras where I breathe very deeply and I say, I always have more money than I need. I cannot help but attract a lot of money into my life. That doesn't mean a sack of money is going to turn up on your door. What it means is that your mind will start receiving thoughts that make you get off your ass and do stuff. But at the same time, there's a weird external mirror thing that happens where my phone started ringing off the wall. Have you ever had this? With people like, oh, we need a musician for this, we need a musician for that. I'm turning down gigs left and right since I started manifestation. I have to go do the gigs. I don't get money without singing. Right. Have you ever had that experience?
Dude, absolutely. You start calling something in. It's the RAS is what I think of it more in visual reality, because if you think of like you're buying a blue Tesla is what I usually think of. How many blue Teslas do you see? But once you've made the decision to buy one, you see them all over the damn place. And it's simply that your mind is now either manifesting. The question I usually ask then is either are you manifesting that or are you tuned into a reality to where there's more of them now running around, and therefore you have a better opportunity at getting one, blah, blah, blah. It's a fascinating anomaly, especially like you said, whenever you decide to do something, the opportunity will come up, or What about this one then, where you are deciding to do something and you get hit with a huge bill, or you get money that comes in and you get hit with a bill equivalent? What does that mean?
I call that, because my name's Steve, so I call myself Even Steven.
Just break
Because
even.
it happens, you have to be specific. Like, and do you know David Parker? You know Don Lester. You know David?
I think so. I've met a lot of people through Dawn lately. I need to sort it out
David's
by
our
face.
co-author on What Really Makes You Ill.
Yes.
As he told me, be careful, Steve. He said, be careful because, like, for instance, my ex-wife and I still have a very large life insurance policy on our son that we raised together. And he said, for all you know, if you're manifesting money, she'll just fucking die from a vaccine jab, right? Like, he's like, you got to be more specific because you might make money in a way you didn't want to make, you know? So
this is important in the semantics in which you're offering your order, right?
Right. But what I'm saying is, as we'll get into, the way this place works, you're not going to do anything unless you're what a man or woman thinks they become. That doesn't mean shit's going to fall in your lap. It means the opportunities fall in your lap because you want them. And the mirror says, here, I'll give you the opportunity, but you can't just lay in bed eating Cheetos and watching Netflix, and then you have to go out and go after it. And what happens is that when the subconscious is programmed by you through will, you start to get excited about going out and taking action as you see results. So I take all these gigs, I get excited, you do it. So our mind is generally operating off one specific frequency. This is it. We go into a trance every day. We wake up, brush our teeth, take a shower, go to work. Right? You come home and you have no fucking clue what you just did all day. You've been running on autopilot. Same when you're driving a car and you just start, daydreaming. Who's driving the car? Right? So you have to pay attention. So it's based on these thinking patterns. Every frequency has a color. Therefore, our mind is manifesting colors within the astral plane, which is one out of our physical plane, based upon what frequency our mind is generally operating off. If we are carrying hate in our mind, people like this, and we've all done it ourselves, we generate reddish colors. This is your chakra system, right? All the bottom to the blue, red shift, blue shift in a toroidal field. So we're humans, H-U-E, we're color people. We are light condensed into the physical, and the mind is where all the light is coming from, right? So our aim is to start vibrating higher. Now, we know you don't always do that. Have you ever had someone piss you off and all day you're just thinking about them and you're thinking weird fantasies like what you're going to do to get them back or if they get hit by a bus? Have you ever had that?
I've had it. Thank God I abandoned this so long ago, but I was very mindful of it. But yes, absolutely. I think this is just something we all experience, right?
Yeah. So what's going on is we're tuning to a certain vibration, either what we'd call negative or positive or color, red or more blue. And then our mind, what a man thinks they become. So when you think about hate all day, what do you become? You become an old, hateful, dried up, a bitter person. So we are light manifested into physical form. Now we're going to get into what's called Lucifer. And again, I have to say, in these esoteric teachings, they don't mean one thing. I think we talked about this last time. There are usually 5 at least, but sometimes more allegories for what these mean, right? So this Lucifer is the light bearer on the left. You can see this. We don't see into reality. So here's a top view on the left of looking down on top of your head. So from here, right? We've got our eyes with the light retinas, and then we've all been taught in school that the left eye and right eye, it actually crosses, and then what we see is being drawn in our brain for us on opposite polarities, the visual field. Well, here's the ancient sigil of Lucifer right next to it. Can you see the 2 visual fields crossing into the 2 eyes and then going back into the brain? So Lucifer means light, Lucy, the light bearer. In Latin, it means light. So the sigil of Lucifer is showing us the visual field of the eyes. That's all it is. And you can see on these Egyptian sculptures, it's very carefully and cleverly crafted into the headdresses.
That's incredible. I was looking at this image when you pulled it up, and that's fascinating.
Yes. So on the right, you see the visual cortex in the back. So, and they teach us this in school. We don't see into the external world. The external world's light waves enter our retinas, and then the image we see is produced in the visual cortex at the back of our brain here, right? So it's the primary cortical region. So we're not just going to go woo-woo today. We're going to mix science into this. So that receives, integrates, and processes just visual light information from the retinas. So the ancient Cometics, which, by the way, as we talked about last time, they got it from Ireland, from Druids. This is not Egyptian. That's all bullshit. This came from Ireland. So, but they understood the reality of the brain, and this is why they put it in these headdresses and all over their pictures. So we won't get in too much into it. There are no elements. The periodic table of elements is bullshit. That's all physical. This is Darwinism, Big Bang bullshit. We made them up. They exist in our mind. Humans are God or light made flesh, right? We are the God or light and magnetism in separate bodies. That we are the one, the monad, separated into the duad, separated into the infinidad. So God is mind, and all things in the universal mind. It's all thinking, and it's thinking all things into existence. So El means God, and ment means mind. So element means God mind. So on the left, we have the electromagnetic spectrum that we know about. We might have talked about this last time. This is only based on actual mechanical instruments we've built to detect these things. So according to our instruments, this is how big the electromagnetic spectrum is. And this little slice, I don't know if you can see my mouse in the middle, is what we can see. Like a dog whistle, we know a dog whistle is real. We know the sound's real because the dogs respond, but we can't hear it. And it's even less. Now, this spectrum could go out to infinity. This is just what we have instruments to detect right now. And as far as we know, just on what we can detect, we only see about 0.0035% of the detectable spectrum, right? So we have to understand that. So Lucifer is not the devil. Lucifer is light, and it used to be the name for Sirius and then later Venus, the light stars that came up right before the sun rose, right? So people need to understand this. Now, before we get into the Christos, which we will, have you ever talked to Dr. Robert Gilbert? He's a Rosicrucian.
I have not. No, not yet, but he's on the list. Robert Gilbert.
Okay. Yeah, he's cool. I just watched a cool lecture. Felix sent it to me last night. So I have to open this again. Hold on. Oh,
Shout out Felix, by the way. She's great.
Hello, Felix Muckart. So yeah, I thought I put these in a good order. I can pull them. So have you ever seen the Kabbalistic tree of life? Oh,
yes.
God. Yes. I was trying to make this not happen again. Here we go.
No, I actually dig when we get to search through all your stuff, honestly, because there's a few things in here we caught last time that I was like, ooh, what's that? And then you went back and talked about it.
Right. So we're always taught about the duality, right? Yin and yang and dual, left, right, this and that. We're never taught that there's a third thing that Walter Russell called, which is Matt Presti calls the fulcrum point, or the dielectric plane, or the white magnetic still light of God, where duality comes from. So we're actually in a trinity. We're not in a duality. And this is the Kabbalistic, you've seen this, the Kabbalistic tree. So right now, I'm not talking about our Kundalini and our 7 chakras, and the Ida and Pingala. I'm not talking about the Caduceus right now. They overlay on that. The center path goes actually physically down our body as the fulcrum point. And then we have the left and the right. And certain things start happening. So on the one side, which would be the right side, they call that Lucifer, which is the light. What this is like an over spirituality. And I've got a slide we can show. Then on the left, you have what's called Ahriman, Arhiman. And what that is total physicality. There's no spirituality. There's no nothing. Everything's physical, right? This is Darwinism, Big Bang, atomism, all of our sciences. And on the right is everything's just spirit. There's no physicality. There's a lot of people, oh, you're just a spirit being and you need to transcend and get out of here, right? This place, everyone's trying to get out of here, right? And the Rosicrucians have a path down the middle. They're saying it's both need to be integrated and intertwined. And I have so you'll see
Will you
this.
pull that up? Yeah. See,
Yeah,
this is what
here
I
we
mean
go.
by that. That's awesome.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, before I do this slide, let's read this, and then this slide will make more sense.
Okay.
Please tell me where that slide is. Here we go. All right. And it's okay if you can't see this. All right. So Lucifer and Ahriman are not beings like you and I are beings. It's not like you, Brandon, me, Bob down at the kiosk, and Lucifer. They are states of being. There's a difference between a being and a state of being. So Lucifer is flighty and warm. It's an unstable influence that inspires human fanaticism and false mysticism. Do you know these spiritual people? They start playing the one-up game. I'm so spiritual that I'm better than you. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of it's oxymoronic, and this happens in so many different degrees too. It's like the Bill Hicks joke about pro-lifers killing people. You know what I mean? For the abortion clinics, they would go over and kill people who were aborting babies. So pro-lifers killing people. It's this access of energy, and it's fascinating. You said this archetype, more this force, because I think of this whenever. The wife and I have talked a lot about this. Instead of saying I'm sad or I'm angry, I'll say I'm accessing sadness or I'm accessing anger. And so I'm putting myself in a state of being to feel that, but I'm not necessarily embodying and taking on the qualities that exist in that perpetually, which is what the other denotes, right?
That's really interesting. We won't get into that, but our language has been rewritten to include subject verb. There is no I am, which is what Luciferian Eastern spiritualism teaches. It's all about the I am until you realize there is no I am, right? It's not I am sad. There is sadness. There's just a thing called sadness going on in the geometrical space-time where you happen to be occupying, right? Yeah.
That's how we feel about it. And so it takes the earnest and this personal touch off of it, I guess, or this personal, you stop taking it personally at that point. And you're just like, oh, okay, it's just experiential in nature, which calls you back to sort of perhaps the real purpose of the realm in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Now, this is not to say, so mostly Eastern mysticism is Luciferian. This is not to say Luciferianism is bad. I'm not saying that it's bad. It has a light Luciferian side and a dark Luciferian side. And you can get what's called spiritual sickness when you become too holier than thou and you don't get what's going on. So it says we can see that in the ego spirituality that is all too pervasive in this day and age. We see a lot of it. I do goat yoga and wear crystals, so therefore, fuck you, I'm better than you. It's a tendency to want to leave this material realm in search of hallucinatory pleasures. Right now, all the mystics, they're like, let's have a rainbow death. Let's get out of here and meditate for 40 years and then just turn into a rainbow. And they do it. They leave. But like when I talked to Beth Martins, she was into this. Then she got cancer. And she's like, yeah, now you're going to die. And it's like, yeah, because you're trying to get out of here. And lo and behold, your body started dying because you want to get out of here. You made yourself sick because you were too much off the center Christ path into the Luciferian path of over spiritualism. Then there's people like me, who's also a Luciferian, because another part of this isn't just an ego trip. And this is love, by the way. This side comes out of love. You want to liberate everyone because you love everyone. You want everything spiritual. But another thing you want is all mystical, sensational pleasure. I drink, smoke, I'm singing in bars because I go into a trance, when I'm singing, I leave my body and people say, what was that song you played second? I'm like, I don't remember. I wasn't there. So there's people like me who are also in a light Luciferian stage where seeking pleasures, like it's not the drugs and the smoking, it's what the drugs do. Like if you love to trip mushrooms all the time, it's not you're addicted to mushrooms, you're addicted to getting out of reality and going into this spiritual side. See what I'm saying? Then on the other side is what's being run now by all the elites, which is called Ahriman. So that's the cold, hard, and mechanical. That's the yellow highlighted at the bottom. Again, this isn't a guy called Ahriman. It's It's a state of being that we all can have. He's rigid and materialistic, and the effect is to just reject all spirit at all in the place of the physical and silence the living principle within the favor of the world of fixed forms. So they promote the illusory concept that matter is all there is. There's just matter and nothing else, no spirit, right? So we see this. We have people who are too over spiritual, and we have people who are too physical. And our job is to walk this down the middle. The Christos oil, and we'll get into that, is the Christ or the Christed being can go back and forth. And you can, so, you know, when you see like Kundalini, how you have the two snakes on the caduceus crossing, every time they cross in the Christ. And this opens what you could call a space-time portal that lets you into that central inner plane or white light of God, you know, that Walter Russell talks about. You could call it that. So whenever you see these paintings like this, and we'll get into what Golgotha and the crucifixion is as we get into the Christos oil, you'll always see that the thief on the left, Golgotha is a word for the skull. We'll get into that. The thief on the left faces Christ. And the thief, that's Lucifer. The thief on the right, Airman, faces away from Christ. That's the physical people like our elites. That's the people who say, nope, there's no spirituality. It's all atoms and molecules and Big Bang and fish turned into monkeys and you're just a big ball of something floating out in space, which means people like me, who you could call a light Luciferian or people who are even too over spiritual, they are savable. Jesus says, yes, you will be in the kingdom of heaven with me tonight, to the thief, this thief, to Lucifer, because he still has a chance to stop his ways and turn toward the middle way, the center way, right? And you see it in Buddhism, like, you know, the center way is in many religions. Ahriman has no chance. He's so far gone, he's fucked, right? That's, anytime you pull up this painting, Ahriman's looking away and Lucifer's looking at Christ, meaning one is savable and one's fucked. They're so far gone, it ain't going to happen. And the joke is, as the Rosicrucians talk about, if you're living in one or the other of these in this incarnation, your karma is to live the fucking polar opposite, the next incarnation. So you might be spiritual, you know, SAF, spiritual as fuck right now. If you're being a Twinkie about it, you're going to be one of them the next time to learn balance. Ain't that a kicker?
Dude, it's so like this. This is in astrology as well. That gaze, by the way, with one eye looking out, one eye looking away, is called the Steve
You want me to pull
Buscemi.
it up again?
Yeah, that's called the Steve Buscemi gaze right there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting as well astrologically when we talk about this inverse of energies. It's sort of like you're given a roadmap, I feel, with this. Whenever you talk South Node, North Node. My wife is really into astrology, and we've talked about this quite a bit. My South Node is Capricorn, which is very rigid, very structured, very Ahriman. Actually, in fact, it's actually a great embodiment of Ahriman. But I am here to embody my North Node, which is Cancer, which would be more of a flowy, easygoing, go with the flow, the literal opposite of that. Now, I'm aware of my tendencies of my Capricorn, but it's because I'm seeing it that I'm aware of it. And so now I've actually been in more surrender mindfully because of the disposition, like the tendency for that disposition.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And as Dr. Robert Gilbert said, the whole idea of this is to watch your thoughts, not to judge them. It's to more than all, not just at night, you know, when you go into that trance in the morning, when you start brushing your teeth and you get home, it's to watch your thoughts, not to judge them or anything. And as he said, it was great. He said, when you know someone's watching you, you're on your best behavior. Right. So, you know, it doesn't matter if it's the government or
that's
who.
an awesome point, because your mind is going to mind its manners, right? Because you've got governance over it. You're mindful of it.
Yes,
you can't get away with shit, you know?
Yeah, because you start governing your mind from the mind plane, one above the astral. Yes, when you start watching yourself, all those weird thoughts you get in, like, look at that fat bitch, and what's that guy wearing? Oh my God, his haircut's so out of style. And why is this person, all that shit that we all got it. That's the other thing is like the Lucifer, if you go to Lucifer, you're like, I meditate, so I've liberated myself from these thoughts. You're like, no, dickhead, we all have these thoughts all the time, right? But even in this drawing, you'll always see Lucifer with light, and you'll see Ahriman with the red chakra, the fire, right? So I just kind of wanted to point that out. And again, like the book that we're doing this, the book we're going through, again, the Book of Wisdom, I'm using it to initiate my son into the mystery schools. But again, I waited till he was 18. I know he's out sexual. I know he's tripping mushrooms. Like, he's experimenting and stuff. And people are like, oh, you're letting your kid do that. And I'm like, well, he's going to do it anyway. So I'm not letting him. It's just that I'm allowing him to have an open conversation about this with me, right? So we can talk about this. So we got into this last time a little bit, the Christ oil or the Christos oil. Now, Freemasons, they never say Jesus Christ, they say Christ Jesus. And we'll get into that. But, let me show you this real quick. I wanted to show you this last time and I forgot. Jesus walks on water, right?
Allegedly.
He walks on water.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you take that literally, you think there's a guy in sandals out in the Middle East walking on water. By the way, those stories take place in the British Isles, but that's for another chat. Well, oil walks on water on the right, and the sun's rays walk on water on the left. So allegorically, when you take Christ or Jesus as the sun, it walks on water every night at sunrise and sunset. And by the way, that does not happen on a rounded surface. You can take a flashlight and a cardboard and bend the cardboard slightly, and that light will not go down the cardboard. That's none of my business.
One of my favorite things about you are these PSs that you have, because the PS that you had about the crucifixion, the last one, I still talk about this. We have our cousin staying with us for a little bit right now. We were telling her about you side trailing into this thing, and it's one of the most brilliant things ever. Just like this right here, Steve. I've never thought of it this way. Brilliant.
Right. And Christ on the right, the Christos oil we're going to talk about, floats on water. Yeah, Jesus Christ walks on water. Of course it does. Hell yeah.
Brilliant.
So what is this Christos? This is the big secret. And as we kind of got into in the beginning, so let me blow this. Oh, no, it was better like this. Yeah, hold on. We didn't blow it up. So this is going to tie into our semen, which we said, which is your corpuscles. Before we get to that, seminaries, the priests go to seminaries. Well, what's seminary? It's a seminary. Right? Why are the Catholic priests, they're not allowed to have sex? And we're going to get into it because when you retain your semen, after we get into what's going on here physically and spiritually, what we're about to talk about happens, and you open up remember we're told in school you use 10% of your brain and 90% is dormant. And then we're told, if you do some LSD, you use 13. You're like, yeah, that's still, where's the other 87%, right? Well, this is what this is all about. This is the big fucking secret. And so this is what these priests were supposed to be about, why they were celibate. But again, when you start putting these Jesuits started grabbing these kids, the Jesuits said, give me a child until they're 7 and they'll be a Jesuit for life. You need to get out and have sex. Like, that's how we're all here. No one's here without sex. Like, that's how we regenerate the whole species, right? So this cerebral spinal fluid, which you can call mercury or quicksilver, mercury is the messenger of the gods, right? And the other name for the cerebrospinal fluid is mercury, quicksilver. So every month, when the moon enters your sun sign, which is your birth zodiac sign, and as we talked about last time, that's an archetype. It's not talking sidereal. It's not saying exactly, right? It doesn't mean when you were born, oh, well, hang on, when I was born, things have changed now, right? I've seen people talking like the sun isn't there in May 21st anymore. It's moved. But when this science was invented, it was a map, just a map. So this still happens. So when the moon enters your sun sign, your birth sign at zodiac, there is a psychophysical oil that is released from the claustrum in the head, in the brain, down the spine to our sacrum, which is the bone at our tailbone, which is why when you hear about Kundalini sex or sex magic, when that it's a pump, right? And I think we talked about this last time with the sacral nerves and Capricorn, the horse, right? This fluid must be cared for and not destroyed by acidic foods and liquids, booze, acid, meats, all that crap. Our sexual energy fluids must be retained. This is why you don't ejaculate, because these make your corpuscles and they can return to your head if you do this, what we're going to talk about correctly, and reignite the dormant brain cells. And we'll get into what the glands do with healing and regeneration, or you can spunk it out. And this is a very energetic it's a psychophysical oil. This is why when you have sex with your wife and you ejaculate, you want to sleep. You know, she wants to lay up and talk all night, and you're like, this is right. Or Rocky says, Rocky's manager, Mick, says, no sex before the fight because women weaken legs. This is what he's talking about. He's talking about this. This is the big secret. So when your moon, now we're Virgos, so this month in October, I looked this up, our moon enters, the moon enters Virgo Saturday, October 26th, around 3:47 p.m., depending on where you are, till Tuesday morning, October 29th, 4:29. So about 2.5 days for everybody. So that's most especially when you want to not drink, smoke, be eating meat and ejaculating. You need to let this oil be pure. So our sexual energy fluids must be retained if we wish to re-raise the psychophysical oil back up to our head, our brain, headven. We talked about this last time, headven and heels. By opening our chakras, preserving our sexual energy, and maintaining the Christos or Christ oil, we can use the power, this is Kundalini power here, behind the sexual energy to raise it, Kundalini, up from the base of the spine back to the crown chakra in the brain. And then because your chakras are what we'd call electrical resistors. If this came up too fast, this is why your brain secretes DMT when you're sleeping. We couldn't walk around all day on a DMT trip. You'd get hit by a bus. You know what I mean? Like you can't, we have to be like this because you can't walk around like this. It just doesn't work here. By awakening the chakras, raising it to the crown, a new energy pathway opens up in the brain. This is what I'm talking about, which feels like your head becomes hollow on the inside, airhead. Jesus says, take no thought, right? And then the brain undergoes a remodeling process, expanding its capacity from roughly 10% to 100. So now we ask, how did all these ancients build these pyramids and buildings and all this shit that our architects can't figure out today? What do you think? Do you think they were using 100% of their brain instead of 10?
The thing that cracks me up about this is that think about the implication out here, guys. Everyone listening, think about this. If you would just settle it down for 2.5 days based on a schedule, everybody just kind of takes turns, man. We'd be in fucking Tartaria. Now, what's hilarious, Steve, about this is that no dude is really taking us up on this, which is why we're not in fucking Tartaria. So is this sort of a realm thing to where because of this, allegedly we're sort of at the bottom of this heavy experience of these yuga cycles, if you want to take it there, that maybe this bombardment of thought to therefore keep us in this much more challenging and suppressed ideology with a lack of this insight. And even when we have the insights, you still got to choose to do it right from a place of difficulty because of programming. So it's interesting that we find this now as we seem to be emerging out of this sort of I would say Yuga cycle to where we were at the very base of this thing, and now we're bringing it back up the spine, sort of at a very macro level. We went down to the heels or Hades, and are bringing it up the sacrum now as a collective. So it's fascinating to be able to get this information, and then, like you said, you haven't talked about it much, but dude, this is all I'm going to be talking about. I've already kind of started encouraging men to look into this, and a lot of people have been taking me up on it. So this is already something that there's interest in. So I'm looking forward to the cathedrals in Tartaria real soon, guys. Just keep in your pants for like 2 days, man. I'm telling you, it's so simple.
You're so on it. And that it's also, it's not just men. When a woman has a physical orgasm, they're releasing the same. So it's not just dudes.
And we're going to get, we have questions for women as well. Absolutely. We want to make sure women feel that they are not excluded in this, but this is a very, since there are two genders, and we're just going to go ahead and boldly say that there are some specifics that need to be sort of understood by both before the macro can be understood as well, which is why we're going over it in this way. But Steve, I'm grateful you pointed it out. I was going to say it anyway.
Yeah. And this is what tantric sex is all about. You can have an orgasm without actually physical fluids coming out of your penis or your vagina. There's squirters out there, you know, if we're going to get fucking dodgy about it.
Let's go for it, buddy.
You can have sex for 3 hours and have orgasms where you don't actually physically release this thing. That's okay. That's fine. That's and the pumping during those 2 hours is what's called Kundalini sex ritual magic. That's pumping. Your sacrum is the bone in your tailbone, and your sacral nerves look like a horse, which is why Sagittarius is the horsetail hips down there. That will rise this thing up here. And there's more to this, but yeah. So that's what that's all about. So if you waste this, that's it. Like, you know, it can be used for regenerative or generative, making babies. And yeah, you're right. You're so on it. And so we're in an age, like Dr. Robert Gilbert said, clairvoyance back in the day used to be like almost schizo clairvoyance. They couldn't control what was coming in. Just all this weird shit was coming in. Like, there's someone in the room here. Is there a Karen? You know, like this and that. Now, as he said, we're coming into a new phase of this where, because we are so mind or left brain oriented, once we relearn this, we're going to be able to direct clairvoyance to find exactly who we want. Not there's 1,000 weird spirits coming into my head. You know, it's like, what do you want to know?
Well, my joking sales pitch for the guys is this is how we get teleportation and laser vision. This is how we unlock our superpowers. But I'm not far off, am I?
You're so on it. And this is what cell phones, the internet, Skype, all of our technology today is trying to emulate what we would have if we used 100% of our brain, and they had back then. All we are doing is digitally trying to make up for what we already instinctively feel we had and should have. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I just kind of want to give everybody a collective moment to take a deep breath here and understand the implications of this scalably. Like, really think about this, and you can see where this is so apprehended, and we've talked about this so much. Why is it so pumped in your face constantly? Oh, you got to jizz, oh, you got to this. NoFap November, guys talk about it, and then the thirst traps just come out, and it's a fascinating bombardment of your power to do this. Like, it's so fascinating. And this is where, Steve, I've gotten a couple years ago, I got hip to this, to where the realm is very, very loud is where I will focus on my empowerment in the opposite direction. And anything that's super loud, like this sex in your face constantly, but then to feel bad about it, this push and pull that the realm offers you, if you're tuned to those frequencies, that's the nonsense you get. But when you tune that out, you get real empowerment and laser vision, dude. I'm all about this, man.
Totally. Do we only have an hour, by the way, or what's?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to cut you off. If you still get,
can we go long?
Presentation. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to go long. I just want to know if it's an hour. Or can we just, because this is going to take a while. I like this, that we're talking about this.
Let's roll. Let's keep it going.
I don't want to be like 50 minutes. Yeah, all right, cool.
No, I'm not cutting this off. No.
I think we should really let this roll pretty long, and then we'll go into the after section, you know. All right. So anyway, yeah. So imagine, like, you're told today a genius has a 160 IQ. Well, imagine you had a 1600 IQ. You don't think you could build the pyramids? Piece of piss. So the dormant areas are unlocked, signaling new ways of brain functioning and experiencing the world. As I said, your brain is just a receiver. It's not where thoughts are coming in. It's a new way of understanding energy coming in through all your senses. So this is where you start getting these ideas from higher realms, because your brain is the interface. You can get all the ideas you want. You can have all the angelic beings saying, hey, dude, you want free energy, do this and that. If you're just a dumbass with a 130 IQ, which is considered really smart today, you're going to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? So the Kundalini over time becomes a self-sustaining energy circuit, fueled by food and water that grows and gets stronger. And this is called the cosmic orbit. So when you're raising this Kundalini, you want to put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and let it return, because this can get dangerous if you raise Kundalini and it gets stuck in your brain. it can't release out your head. So the cosmic orbit is when you take your tongue and put it to the roof of your mouth and allow this energy to start circling, not just rise. So we all know Christmas, Santa Claus comes down the chimney with the presents, right? And that's Santa Claus, the claustrum. Santa Claus starts this oil which comes down. So the process of this, you know, people who get into their Eastern, you got the Ida and Pingala. So the Ida is the channels connected to the pituitary gland, which is where we get our serotonin. And that's in your front lower part of your brain is the pituitary gland. And then you've got the Pingala, which is the masculine. Ida is feminine, by the way, which is the channel connected to the pineal gland, which is in the back middle of your head. All right, so that's your Ida and Pingala, or you see the caduceus of Hermes, whose other name is Mercury, Quicksilver, where this rises up. So the claustrum, Santa Claus coming down the chimney with the presents, he produces the psychophysical fluid, what we call cerebrospinal fluid, or this oil, which first goes into the pineal and the pituitary gland. So you can see those glands up on the right here. Right. So it comes from the claustrum, and first on the way down, it goes through the pineal and the pituitary gland. And the pineal gland electrically charges the fluid. So that's the sun, the male. And the pituitary gland magnetically charges the fluid. That's the moon, female, Mary, right? So this fluid is neutral when it comes out of the claustrum, and now it becomes electromagnetically charged on the way down. Then it travels down the two nerves. So we call that the central and peripheral nervous system, or the motor and sensory nerves, right? It comes down after it's charged. Where are we at?
5.
5, right? And it comes down there, which is connected to the pineal gland. And then the oil sits for 2.5 to 3 days. This is the moon is about 2.5. This is Jesus sitting in the tomb dead for 3 days. And as we talked about, when you wrap the human body around the zodiac and put the sun there last time, this is December 21st, when in the sky, the sun stops going any further down or any further south in the sky. Right? And it sits down there, right down there at the sacrum bone. This is where we get the word sacred, and the solar plexus, the sun plexus. If the oil is saved and not destroyed, again, by acidic drinking, eating, sex, ejaculation, then it turns into a gas form, and it rises up the 33 vertebrae to the medulla oblongata in the back of the brain. And then that passes this up to the pineal gland, which it ran through after it went through the pituitary gland and the other one, right? So now it comes back up, back into the cerebrum again, where it came from, whence it came. And this is resurrection. This is rebirth and resurrection of the dormant brain cells, the 90% we don't use, activated by the pineal gland, and regenerates the cells in the body, or the tissue, and this is called being born again. So Christians, being born again doesn't mean I believe in Jesus and let a priest splash water over my head in a baptism tank and I'm fucking reborn, right? And we'll get into the science of how this works with the pineal, pituitary, and the thalamus. We'll get into physically what's going on. So here on the right, the brain in the Bible is the upper room where Jesus meets the 12 disciples. So there are not only 12 zodiac signs, there are 12 cranial nerves. And you also have 12 nerves in the solar plexus, right? That's called the Holy Land, the land flowing with milk and honey, or the promised land of Israel, Isis, Ra, and El. So Christos is Greek for oil, and then it becomes the Christ, Corinthians 13:5. Do you not know that Jesus Christ is within you? Right? So on the left, and let me show you too, so as we talked about last time, the land of milk and honey, right? And we'll get into this a little more, but as we said, the ancients drew the whole body out in the sky. So just like I showed you the zodiac last time wrapped around. Should I show that zodiac again? Or I think
if
people
you don't
will
mind,
get it.
for reference, yeah.
Would you like it? Okay.
Because it's such a cool. I've shown it 12.5 times on here. Steve, I've talked about the tissue cells thing more than anything on this show probably recently, and I know that I'll be all over this too.
Okay, so just to show people, here's your 12 disciples, James. Here's your zodiac with all the months and the signs. Now, people say, hang on, there's a 13th constellation, and there used to be 13 months because a moon means month, and blah, blah, blah. And so this whole tropical astrology is off because there's really 13 constellations, and you're like, no, there's only 12 cranial nerves, 12 nerves. Everything in the body and everything in wave mechanics is 12, 5s, and 7s. There's no 13.
But what about the tortoise? The tortoise bugs me, man. And this is a personal one with me in the sidereal versus tropical, is because the tortoise shows the 28 tabs around and then 13 sections, not 12. And this is how indigenous tribes would write.
Yeah. But this isn't a science about turtle shells. This is a science about the 12 nerves in your body.
Thank you for just evaporating that from my mind as something so silly. I really appreciate that freedom.
So in other words, another way to put this is the energy, what we now have calendars, right? There weren't calendars before. So the sky was the calendar. In other words, what today we call March 21st on a calendar, what we call spring, and the grass starts growing, and now it's time to plant crops, and you can crop, there's an energy there. I don't care if you call that Aries or call it Baloney Roni month or call it Bazooka Wooka month. The energy of what we call March 21st will always be that energy at where we call March 21st. I don't give a fuck what you call it. And this is where the sidereal people are getting this wrong. They're saying, well, yeah, but now the sun rises not in Aries there. It rises in, I don't know if it's Pisces or Taurus. It doesn't matter. When they made this science, that was the energy. So if, let's say you call it giraffe, we would have to write a whole new mythology saying, oh, no, the giraffe constellation rises, the sun rises into giraffe on March 21st. So now we have to call the head the giraffe and make a whole new mythology about a giraffe. Because Aries, do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what you actually see in the sky. This is a science that was built around naming the energies of the 12 functions of the wave of the sun throughout the year. Does that make sense? Yeah, there aren't 13 functions of a wave. There are 12. At the time, the geniuses who had 100% of their brain and put this together wrote this map. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. So I could see then how later on, even if it was adapted to a physical reference, sort of like a tortoise, it still wouldn't have been built on the same principal architecture. I see.
It's just, because constellations aren't real. Go look at the constellation Leo. It's like a kid could draw a stick figure better than that. Like, it's not a lion up there. There's no fucking lion.
I have thought about this. And then how they're different sizes but cover the same degrees. Things like this. Like Virgo's massive and covers like 90 degrees.
Right. They're not this. Yeah, this is all split into 33, 30 degrees. They're not. Like if you look at Taurus, it's much longer. It's not, it's not that. This is just a map. That's all it is. That's where everyone gets confused, is they're taking the map literally and then saying, well, right now, because of the precession of the equinoxes, which is real, the sun doesn't rise on March 21st in Aries anymore. And you're like, I know. But it did when the guys who drew this map did, so that's why it's there. It doesn't have anything to do with it. And that's where people get it wrong, right? But the whole point was, sorry. So they drew our body around the sky. As you see, the man inside, his head is Aries. We did this last time, but you can see back then when the map was made, every constellation coincided with a part of the body. Now, yes, correct. If you literally took the sun coming up, this man should be rotated. But it doesn't matter. They're talking about the energy. They're not talking about what you name the energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a beautiful representation, man. It really is.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I described that properly.
You crushed. Absolutely crushed.
Okay. Yeah. And now, okay, yeah. Oh, the land of milk and honey. Sorry. Okay. I lost my track. So, because they drew the body around the zodiac, which is the stars in the sky, so you have these glands are the land of milk and honey, which we'll get into what they are in the body, right? So here's the year in the zodiac. you have Gemini and Cancer. Here's the split. So summer starts at Cancer. There's the summer solstice between Gemini and Cancer. Gemini is the lungs, right? And Cancer is all the next part in between. And in the sky, you have, if you look down the celestial sphere, you have the Milky Way runs from between Gemini and Cancer down to between Libra and Virgo down here. If you were to draw the Milky Way constellation, it would look in the sky like it comes down here. So milk is the Milky Way starting from Gemini and Cancer split, descending down to Scorpio and Sagittarius. And the land of honey in the sky is called the Beehive Cluster, which is called, on the right here, see Messier 44 in the constellation of Cancer. So in the sky, they drew the land of milk and honey. That's how, because they drew our whole body in this whole story in the stars. They weren't, God didn't, see, people are like, God put this story in the stars. You're like, God didn't write this shit. Man connected to God because his 100% of his brain is open and wrote this. God didn't write the Bible. He doesn't have a hand. He doesn't have paper. He doesn't know right? So anyway, so we'll get into what that is. So we did that. So the upper rooms where Jesus meets the Holy Land, the land flowing with milk and honey, which we'll get into what these glands do. Milk is the pituitary gland. Honey is the pineal gland. Pineal is your melatonin, and pituitary gland is your serotonin. And we'll get into that later. And the thalamus gland is dopamine, which we're going to get into why Facebook and TikTok have everyone scrolling for dopamine hits. We're going to get into what they're doing because they know this. Okay, so yeah, how to retain the oil. Did we do that? Retain your sexual fluids on the left. Consume an alkaline diet. No consumption of acidic foods and fluids, especially during when the moon's in your thing. By the way, as Santos Bonacci pointed out, I don't know if this is true. So when the moon is in these signs, it's exciting the blood. Just like when people go crazy on a full moon, right? In police stations and hospitals. Surgeons can't figure out, there's always a month out of the year where surgeons have people bleeding to death at certain, heart surgeons lose them at a certain time, brain surgeons lose them at another, when you know that the moon is in like the Aries, the brain sign, and you need a brain surgery, you don't want to go in there if they did it when the moon's there, because that's when you bleed out.
Oh, could this be why if you get a wound on your arm or something like that, it bleeds like crazy? It's because that part of your blood is excited. And so okay, but Steve, that means that as it's flowing through your body, it slows down, is not excited, but is excited in this one particular area along a vein and then not along other parts.
Yeah, because these ancients knew that the resonances resonated with certain parts of the body through the cell salts. Because the cell salts that make up the brain are different than the ones that make up the heart, and they spin at a certain frequency and resonate with a certain alignment frequency. And so, of course, the sun and the moon, the electric and magnetic forces that are creating reality, affect them. Of course they do. Of course.
This is so fascinating.
Right. So no alcohol, Kundalini meditation, balance your chakras, keep your tongue on the top of your mouth. That's what I told you. To do the cosmic orbit, you put your tongue up on the roof of your palate.
What's the protocol on that? Is that while meditating, while walking around? Is it just
I do it all the time.
You think about it? Okay. Just don't
let your tongue naturally. If you actually start paying attention to yourself, you'll find yourself throughout the day sticking your tongue on the top of your teeth or the top of your mouth for no fucking reason whatsoever. So you think you'll see you do it automatically, just like animals lick their wounds. Like, you don't have it. Just like when you get burned on your hand, the first thing you do is grab it with the other hand. Why are you doing that?
It's reactionary.
Because it heals. So Psalms 137:6, my tongue clicked to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. All right?
Is that to be interpreted like if I don't remember you, if I don't recognize divinity in you, if I put my tongue to my mouth, I will, because it'll complete the circuit and enlighten me to that?
If I have no divinity and not in the God mind, I'll put my tongue to the roof of my mouth and start the cosmic orbit.
Wow.
right? So on the left here, we got the heaven, the headven, and the sacrum, the cave where Jesus was dead, right? And this has been moved. This actually happened in the Middle East, and we should do or in the British Isles. We should do a show. None of this shit happened in the Middle East. It was moved by Constantine Hadrian. I won't. We can't get into that now.
I'll note it. We'll book another.
This whole story happened in the British Isles, but we won't get into that. So on the right, Jesus, the oil, or Christ, the Christos of Nazareth, in the head. Now I will say this. The biblical towns in the Old Testament and the New Testament, they did exist in the British Isles, and they were again renamed where the Roman Catholic emperors and church has put them in the Middle East, has transplanted them. The idea came from the Druidic mind and body first. Then, of course, they named the cities after the science because they were spiritual science people. So you don't name your town, Bobby Timkins. If all you think about is this, you name it Jerusalem, right? You know what I mean? Of course, the cities were named after the science, but then the Roman Empire transplanted these cities again into the Middle East, where none of this ever happened there.
Dude, and you've got these names over in the States as well. So some people have said the cradle of civilizations, everything is right here in the U.S.
Yes, because the Druidic priests of On, who we talked about last time, brought this everywhere. And that's where they named it.
So crazy.
I know, but the original names don't come from the name of the cities. They come from this science. And of course, to remember this science, they call the city from the science, of course, right? So Nazareth is, yeah, go ahead.
It's just fascinating because you know how then they'll throw esoteric concepts allegedly, and who knows what this is for? Is this revelation of the method or karma or what? But there'll be something sort of wild happen in a movie, and then it will happen in real life, and then people will be like, "Oh, like you mean like in the movie?" But this is what's interesting about this. It's sort of flipped around. Whenever you say that this was named after the discipline, and then somebody brings up that the discipline was called the name, people go, "Oh, you mean like the city?" So it's automatically discounted in a way that it's already they've already got it covered in their mind as far as they're concerned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I was just talking to my friend Sarah. Hi, Sarah, Wild Forager. The great Bill Donahue. I don't know if you got into Bill Donahue's work. Do you know him?
A bit, but not a lot. But I find that dude fascinating. Everything he said, I was just like, oh my God, he makes you think for sure. Yeah.
Right. The problem with him is there's no problem with him. He's one of the guys I learned all this, and Santos Bonacci and others. By the way, I didn't make any of this shit up. This is not me saying any of this, right? I'm not presenting anything here that's I made up or take credit for. Problem with Bill, it was back, in the 90s and early 80s when he was lecturing, he got all this. He thought NASA was real. He thought they really had fucking space telescope, and he thought quantum physics and particle physics were real. So he's saying, yeah, look at atom and photon and all these names of particles and space and all that match the science of the Bible. And he's like, what are the odds? And I'm saying, yeah, because the people who made up all that bullshit know this science, and they're doing it as a fucking piss take. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not totally God's will that an atom is called an atom. It's because these fuckers know this, and they name their fake science after this. The Jesuits did this. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. It's happening in the United States right now because the United States is not the landmass. It's the corporation. And so whenever you say I'm from the state of Texas, you're actually talking about the corporate state of Texas, not the landmass of Texas. It's very different. They name the same damn thing.
Yeah, and since Jesuits made up atomic theory with protons, neutrons, electrons, and atoms, they named the atom after Adam and Eve because they know that's the red ship, blue ship. It's not the Bible predicted that science would catch up to the Bible. It's that these fuckheads have named fake science after things in the Bible as a piss take.
Totally.
But Bill didn't get this, and that's cool. I still love all Bill's work, even though, and I listen to any of his lectures or read. You have to discern now. We're in an age where you have to discern. Even people listening to me, there might be some stuff we talk about here where someone comes along in 10 years and some of this might be not correct. So I'm not claiming this is anything, right? We're just presenting information.
I love the conversation, dude. This is so fascinating. It just makes you think in a completely different way, but then it makes you ask questions that would be specific for you, and that is where your discernment comes in.
Right, yeah. So Jesus is your oil, the cerebral spinal fluid in Nazareth, the head, where the claustrum and all these glands are. Joseph and Mary, the pineal and pituitary gland. And then King Herod wants to kill all the firstborn sons because he knows the Christ is coming, right? King Herod is you wanting to go out drinking, fucking, smoking, eating acidic food, party, right? He
Or
wants
kill the kids, right? To let it evacuate. You know what I'm saying?
The Bible says you must become like children. Take no thought, become like children. Children don't have all this mind chatter in their head, right? King Herod wants to kill the firstborn children. They don't. King Herod is your lower nature not wanting you to meditate and do the right thing and go into this side of your brain, because King Herod is your lower nature running riot, or let's call it Ahriman. Right? King Herod is Ahriman, not Lucifer. He doesn't want you being spiritual because he wants to ejaculate and he wants to eat Burger King, and right, he wants his ego stroked. So he's killing all the kids because he doesn't want anyone to be born that ruins his ride. Right? So Jesus, the Christos oil, goes down the River Jordan, our spine, to Bethlehem. So the River Jordan in Egypt, and it was originally in Scotland, is named after your spine. Your spine's not named after the River Jordan. The River Jordan's named after your spine, as we talked about. Down to Bethlehem, next to the Dead Sea, the sacrum bone where this oil stops in the Dead Sea. And Joseph and Mary, the pineal and pituitary gland, are waiting for their son Jesus, the oil, to return back up from the Dead Sea to them. So the process of the oil coming down from the head symbolizes Jesus coming down from heaven, or Santa Claus coming down the chimney with the presents. So then Jesus dies for 3 days down in the sacrum and is resurrected to be crucified at 33 years old. That's how many vertebrae you have in your spine, 33 when it comes back up. And it's a metaphorical story about the Christ oil in the body, which then will activate 100% of the brain if you haven't de-electromagnetized the fluid or ejaculated it out down there. So that's all it is a metaphor. I don't need to read the rest. We got it right. So we'll go to the Christ oil. So on the top left here, Jesus is crucified at Golgotha. Well, what is Golgotha? Is that a place? That's the ancient Irish name for your skull. This is Golgotha right here. So Jesus is crucified at Golgotha, which means a place in the skull. There's Jesus on the cross on the top left. Do you see him in the midbrain? Here's a cross section of your brain from the back. There's a canal there. That's also called the Holy Grail. If we have time, we'll get into King Arthur and the Holy Grail. There's a cavity in there that's shaped like a cup in a chalice, right? So your spinal cord and your vagus nerve come up here. Do you see them crossing? As we talked about, the left and the right side are doing like this, going left to right. So you're not only spiritual and physical, you can go back and forth, and where they cross in the center point is where you get what you might call space-time crosses or portals or dimensions, where you get into God. You get into this white, still magnetic light of God. So the Christ oil passes the 33 vertebrae, I'm on the top right now, the spine, passes up the vagus nerve, which is where it crosses. So do you see on the way up the two nerves on the left, the vagus nerve and here, see how they're on opposite sides? Do you see at the cross, they cross again on the top? See that? See where Jesus is put right there? This is where this comes back up and crosses. So the 33 vertebrae for the 33 years of Christ, or Christ oil, Jesus dies at 33, symbolizing turning matter into spirit. When we move this oil back up past the 33 vertebrae, and he sacrifices his flesh, right? Jesus sacrifices his flesh. That means his lower nature. It doesn't mean his actual flesh. It means he sacrifices his desire for sex, drugs, rock and roll, like all that shit, and now has manifested as God's self, meaning he's opened up the right brain. The right, or the east, in the Bible, you always hear Jesus says, cast your net to the right, you'll catch the fish. Look to the east, east, right, right? They're talking about the right side of the brain. That's all they're talking about. They're saying through this practice, Kundalini and meditation, you can open up these right dormant brain cells, and that's where light activates in your head. Light becomes matter, and matter escaping becomes light. And that's where you start to connect. Now, in the Bible, John 3:3. Now, what number is that?
Spinal column number. How fascinating.
You think that's an accident that the people, that the Roman Catholics who wrote the Bible made John 3:3 this passage?
No.
33, your vertebrae. Unless you are born again, you cannot see the kingdom of God. They don't mean like let a guy baptize your head in a puddle of water. People go into church and they let this priest dunk their kid's head underwater and traumatize them.
Sometimes
you
violently.
are
Have you seen
baptized.
those dudes coming in for like their slam dunking in that Nintendo game. Yeah.
And the baby's crying and the priest is dunking their head underwater. Now there's another several levels to this, which is the spiritual baptization from earth, water, air, fire, and right. So there's another, but we're not going to get into that. But it's not a coincidence that John 3:3 is talking about being reborn again. You are reborn when the oil raises back up and passes. So on the right here, and I've shown you this last time. So we'll get into Jacob's ladder too, right? Jacob names the place. Before I show you this, let me show you this. I think we showed this last time, but I just want to show this again. Didn't we look at that Michelangelo picture?
Yes. But please show it again. For
It's in here somewhere. That one.
Yep.
Did we not look at that? Da Vinci,
Absolutely.
not Michelangelo. It's Da Vinci.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's Michelangelo. Did we look at that?
Yes. I love this. And this is how you're touching God with this.
He's touching Adam or man. Yeah, he's touching us. But look at the shell they're sitting in. It's the brain. This is it. They drew this picture. He's drawing this picture because they would have killed you back then. These were the Inquisitions going on. Like you could. So this guy is drawing these all over the alleged churches, which are probably Tartarian buildings, right? This is what they're talking about. This is this. And Christians have this picture up in their house and they're like, oh, you're like, you don't even have a fucking clue what you're looking at. Well, this is what you're looking at. So Jacob falls asleep on the Ben stone, right? And then he has a dream where this ladder goes up, Jacob's ladder to go. So Genesis 32:30, 3:2-3, right? Jacob names the place where he climbs up the ladder Peniel. What does that sound like to you, Peniel? What gland?
Pineal, man.
Pineal. Or he said, I have seen God face to face, and Peniel or pineal is the pineal gland, which is the seat of consciousness, the throat of God. This is the interface gland where we talk to light. This is it. Luke 17:21, the kingdom of God is within you. Jesus keeps saying, do you not know the kingdom of God is within you? Oh, wait a minute. I thought you have to believe in Jesus or else you can't go up to the kingdom of God. Well, if the kingdom of God is out, if it's within you, then how come you have to say, I'm born again and believe in Jesus? I believe, and then you can go up to the kingdom of God if it's in you. Because they're not talking about after you die. They're talking about while you're alive. Right? So Jacob in the ladder, symbol on the left, I'm here. Oh, here, Matthew 6:22. The light of the body is the eye. Therefore, thine single eye, shall be single. The whole body shall be full of light. Jacob's the oil in this parable. The rock he falls asleep on is our sacrum bone. That's the Ben stone, where the oil falls and stays for the 3 days. And then he saw the ladder that reached to heaven, which is the spinal cord leading up to the brain, heaven, right? And that's the stairway to heaven. So and we've just said it in the middle here. He took the rock and laid his head to sleep, and he had a dream, and there was a ladder on the ground that reached to heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down the ladder, and then he saw the Lord standing by the ladder, right? So that's all they're talking about. If you want to be godlike, I'm sorry to all you Jews, people choose to be godlike. God doesn't have chosen people. You don't go murder Palestinians and genociding them. By the way, Jerusalem was Edinburgh, Scotland, and Israel was Scotland. but we won't. That's none of my business, right? But you Jews who think you are in the Holy Land, your Holy Land's in your fucking head. And it was renamed Edinburgh in Scotland, and now you're in the Middle East because the Jesuits put you there, killing Palestinians, calling yourself God's children. God's children don't murder women. They don't genocide. You Jews, shame on you, right? But that's none of my business. We'll get back to that anyway, right? So this is Freemasonry, which was Irish Freemasonry. There it is. Remember I showed you the Sephiroth and the center way? And then you had Lucifer and Ahriman on the left and right. See the two poles? See this? And there's the center way, and then there's the two other ways. Your body is the temple, right? So here's the Christ oil is the Christos. So yeah, we've done that. 33, the thieves at Golgotha. We've done that. So the two thieves at Golgotha, this is what they're talking about. They're representing the space within your skull between the right and left hemispheres. So this is what you call the veil of Isis. Have you ever heard of the veil of Isis?
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting, too, this head piece is also, is it the shape of the pineal gland? Is that what that conical head piece means?
Yes. Yeah.
God, the conical head is so interesting because it goes so deep into witch mythology. Bigfoots have conical heads as well. Some aliens have elongated heads. You have people in cultures as well elongating heads physically for their children in Peruvian cultures and such. This
like
is
they wrap their kid's head, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have other people saying the Anunnaki.
Exactly.
Right, yeah. An is the Irish priest of An, of the sun. The Anunnaki are the Irish druidic priests who spread this knowledge. Zechariah Sitchin's made this whole bullshit up for the Jesuits. Sitchin's office was on the same floor in a CIA building as a CIA office. And then he magically gets these tablets.
It's so much fun, right? You know, and it's interesting too. I think this place all goes to scale, and that's going to be another conversation that we have to have, because I think that also there was a guy named Jonathan something that wrote The Secret History of the World. Damn it. Anyway, it's one of the, there's a bunch of secret histories of the world, but this one was awesome. Jonathan Black. And he talked about that man's perception of reality has altered so much because of not necessarily evolution as far as Darwinism goes, but as far as our ability to perceive and navigate reality, as far as colors coming online at different times. Then you think about us discovering planetary bodies, unlocking new consciousnesses. Like when we got into Neptune, when we finally saw Neptune, that's when this esoteric, real deep mystery concept came out. So it got real heady when we started discovering the planets out further. That's when we got into real mentalism. But before all of that, there seemed to be a physical nature here that defied anything that we would recognize now. And it all had to do with man's interpretation of reality, but also the way reality interacted with man. So it was much more like you said, you couldn't turn it off. He sort of postulates that there were physical beings that would then, and this is what goes to scale for me, would come out of you essentially, manifest in front of you in their form, how they are shrunk down. This is also where you get angels and things like this. You look under a microscope, there are bacteria that look exactly like the angel with the multiple wings and stuff. Maybe this was more on a very observable level from both points, or maybe, again, man's ability to see within himself, he could see all of these things and interact with them in an environment similar to what we experience. Again, all of this is fascinating. And when we talk again scale, you and I are going to have to do that at some point, because that's a very cool conversation. This, again, where these small things are anthropomorphized in larger form, very fascinating, man.
Well, like you made a ton of good points there. Like one, when we finally discovered Neptune, you're like, we finally discovered a planet the ancients called their god Neptune.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But again, like I'm saying, our science people know this. They're naming this planet Neptune after this, right?
Right.
They're naming Neptune after this science. And did these people know about Neptune? Probably, because they had brains, 1,600 IQs, and we have 160 of them, our geniuses. But yeah, so that's a whole nother ball.
You and I have so many rabbit trails to go on. I love this, by the way. This is wonderful.
Yeah. So anyway, like we said, Golgotha is the place in your skull between the left and right hemispheres, or what you'd call the Veil of Isis, which was the Irish name for night and the moon. So the 33 is the spinal column. We talked about that on the back. Jacob's ladder, across the midbrain and the ventricles, and they create a holy grail shaped cavity inside our head. So that space, this is another allegory. And again, I got to remind people there are 4 or 5 allegories to this. So in the human body, that space is the manger. Jesus is born in a manger, right? This is when this thing comes back up and where it comes down in the first place. So that's this cavity in your head, which it holds the Pia Mater, or tender mother, Mother Mary. So that this is where the claustrum produces the cerebral spinal fluid, linked to the salts of salvation, which we've talked about. I'm on the left here, by the way, for people looking. And then it's baptized in the River Jordan in the spinal cord, travels down and returns crucified, which we've talked about. So I think we've already talked about all that. Sanctification, yeah. So here we go. So now we're in the middle section here. So the sun and the moon are the male and female principles, right? The sun is electric, the moon is magnetic. That correspond with all things in creation. Sun is positive, male and electric. The moon is negative, female and magnetic. The sun actually materializes into gold, like really literally, and the moon materializes into silver. The sun and moon are what are creating the vibrations, right? These sacred fluids in our brain. It is the sun and moon. So these fluids are referred to in the Bible as the milk and honey. So this is what's going on. The land flowing with milk and honey is the brain. So Numbers 14:8, and if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. So the Lord, or God, is your higher inner self, your observer. As we talked about, you have to watch your thoughts, right? The Christ. Milk, or the moon, is the pituitary gland, which is serotonin. And honey is the sun, the pineal gland, which is melatonin. And others, we'll get into that, right? So you have to rise back up. This is what this is all talking about. The Lord is not pleased with you. You become like the Lord. You have to do this. So here on the left, you know your alchemy, I'm sure. So you know the female. You've got the female symbol on the left. It's the downward triangle with the opening, or the vagina on the top, and the male has the point up. So you got your right brain, which is there, female, and your masculine left brain, which is the thinking mind, the critical mind. And we know this. You ask your wife, how was your day? And she's like, fucking, you wouldn't believe how I feel about, right? You're like, oh, we can't get to our cousin's wedding today. And she'll just go for an hour how she feels about that.
Yep.
And you're like, well, how are we going to get there? You're a dude. You're left. You know what I mean? You're like, let's rent a car.
Point. And when I guess conversing with a woman from a male's perspective, this is a very valuable thing to learn, guys. I learned this a long time ago. Women, whenever they're giving you a problem, if you ask, hey, what's going on, and they start going off, they only want you to respond with one thing. And your one thing is, that sucks. Okay. And then just don't say anything else. Okay. Because they don't want to hear solutions. They don't want us to go, oh, we can fix it this way, this way, this way, and this way, because we can, but that's not the point. Theirs is to feel and emote and channel. And so ours is to recognize that is what they're doing without offering suggestion, and let them be in that process. It's fascinating.
Yeah. They just want you to say you understand them.
That's it. Oh, that sucks, baby. That's it. Come here. Give me a hug.
Yeah.
Before we move on, can I call your attention to one, picture that you have here in the middle section with the guy and then the 2 rectangulars, just a little bit up. The third image.
You want me to go up a little bit?
If you don't mind, right there. So that third image there with the sun, the moon, if you look at the bottom, the landscape, it forms the pelvic bones. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And this is a very ancient alchemical symbol. I've talked to Steve Young, my friend, about this quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah. You'll also see your chakra systems coming up. Then you'll see your sun and your moon. Then you'll see the male principal triangle. And then you'll see the crown on top, the crown chakra, Kronos, the crown, Saturn.
The physical geography of the landscape underneath to form that ground on which this now is elevated is, again, this physical, because we're of clay, right? We're of the earth. So our body at lowest would be represented at the base in that geography. It's It's just
Right.
really, and now I'm thinking of several images I've seen with grounds undulating off in different directions from a central point up rather than a flat horizon. And now I can see it. You give us the eyes to see these alchemical texts in new ways, man. Thank you.
And I'm not even great. Like, that was a really good observation. You know, this is because you would have got killed by the Catholic Church. They're the ones who hid all this from us. The Jews don't run this joint, as we talked about. The Roman Catholic Church, and all roads lead to Rome. This is why these great alchemical artists were drawing this stuff. The reason normal people look at this stuff and go, "What the fuck is that?" is because you're not supposed to understand it unless you're in. That you can't, like, they'll kill you. They would have tortured you if they knew you were drawing this. That's why we have a lot of trouble now, is we're not taught any of this shit. Were you? I didn't learn any of this crap.
No, but again, like you said, if I would have been taught it, it would have been, I don't know, because from that standpoint, then that tells us that we are in a completely different environment in which those ideals are open to discuss, is coveted, and then people are already at practice with these openly. And so in my mind, again, I think that we are sort of the ones bringing this out for the next generation to look at this at a much younger age and apply. Like you said with your son, taking him through the initiatory route, and there are so many incredible people doing this initiation. They're taking it seriously with their children. And I think it's beautiful, man. This is what's missing, and this is what ended up with non-Tataria, just a jizz-covered realm. This realm just has you don't want to walk around with a black light here because it's so gross. It's just interesting, Steve.
And again, you don't want to teach this to children too young, because of, like, if I can't ejaculate and this girl wants to give me a hand job in the back of a Chevy, he's going to start hating women and being afraid that she's trying to kill me.
He's going to be one of those incels. Yes, there is a tipping point, right?
There is, yeah. Like, you have to understand, like, you can't, you have to balance your whole thing at once. You can't fix one side of you. Otherwise, you get what's called spiritual toxicity. You'll get
the pendulum swings too hard, and then you counterbalance in that direction, overcorrecting.
Yeah, they tell a priest he can't get married or have sex because of this, because he's supposed to actually he's supposed to open his dormant brain cells and be a priest. But you tell this guy who's got normal sexual urges, because none of us would be walking around without them. Every one of us is here because your mom fucked your dad and your grandma fucked you. You know what I mean? They got horny. You're all here because someone got horny in your family all the way up the line. Now, if you start telling this shit to a 7-year-old kid, they're not going to get horny.
No.
You got to let them go.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, it's missed,
you know what I mean?
right? It's just confusing, and it introduces confusion way too early on a subject that needs time to develop.
Yeah, and this is why the Catholic Church blames everything on Eve.
You know, it's funny you say this about the Jesuits as well.
She seduces us. It's the whore of Babylon. It's the woman seducing us. We didn't do it. You're like, you're horny as shit like there. See where this all goes? When you take this shit literally and don't understand this, look at the world around you today. The Jews think they're going to their Holy Land and they're genociding Israel because they don't know it's in their head. You see what I'm saying? Like, old men are raping little boys, and see, because they're suppressing sexual urges, and then they're having black masses. You see,
the middle path then would be to give yourself the 2.5 days, right, to really focus on this as a practice. But then that means only, I don't know what the exact percentage of, but it seems pretty small if we're talking about a month, and we're literally talking about 13 times a year here, guys. So there's a window of time for 2.5 days a month, sometimes twice a month, depending on blue moon, whatever. 13 times a year, that's it. And so this would probably change this entire reality, is what you're talking about. If dudes really just, and women as well, focused on this practice in a mindful way and didn't feel too tethered not to experience sex in the other mass percentage of the month, and explore their sexuality in an open way, but then also to really focus on it in this way and abstain, but not abstain. It's go within. It's donate that jizz back to yourself, right? It's like a tithing almost.
But also, like, it's not just those 2.5 months though, Brandon. It's like jizz is your corpuscles. It's all the time. This is where tantric sex came from. You're supposed to have 2-3 hours of sex where you stop and don't ejaculate. But see, now we're taught through porn. This is why they have porn. They want you to ejaculate. They're trying to kill you early.
Right.
This is why women outlive men by like 7 years on average too, because men physically release physical corpuscles through ejaculation, whereas only women who are squirters will, but not others. So, there's that to this as well. But Yeah, so there are practices where you can have a spiritual communion through sex, and again, then it becomes when you don't know where you left and they begin. So there's a way where you and your partner can fuse together. So this is what Kundalini. So there are ways around this. In the ancients who understood this, they would ejaculate to make babies only. That was the rest of the time was Kundalini, and then tantric sex. Then when it was time to have a baby, you blow the load or whatever. But that's okay. So yeah, this is kind of where this comes from. This is where all the porn's coming from. They want you ejaculating, or in depopulation times, like this is yeah. You have to be careful because this is going to make you afraid of your partner and of sex, and sex is totally natural.
This is where we need to empower people. So are we telling dudes never to jizz unless you're wanting a baby?
I'm telling dudes because this is your life longevity. If you're not screwing your wife or your girlfriend or whatever and having a good time, if you're sitting there in your bed watching porn and jizzing into a sock or a paper towel, you're just excreting all this life force and it don't come back. You've got X amount, and then you better start taking cell salts. You only make so much, baby. This is like a gas tank that can't be refilled.
Right. And then as it's alchemized, is the longer you build it up, the more gases that then build up and release back up to you, or does a certain percentage of it get sort of re-alchemized into your body, like into your tissues? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, that's coming. You're going to see how these glands regenerate tissue.
Perfect.
So we'll get into that. We're jumping the gun, metaphorically.
Pun intended. Come on. Yeah.
We're blowing the load to her.
In this.
We're blowing the load. Yeah, we'll get into that. Everlasting life is not talking about when you die and go up into heaven. They're talking about right here. Now, in the Bible, this is all allegorical, but isn't it weird in the Bible that they're like 1,000 years old and then so-and-so 680? You ever think about that?
Yes. And I knew it tied into this, by the way. Yeah. I knew it had to be something like this.
Right. So the question is, were they 1,000? Because they're not real people, but like, if you and I are writing a story like Shrek, and you're like, we're going to make a movie called Blade Runner where the lead character is 1,200 years old. You're like, why would we do that? No one would even relate to that. Like, what? You know what I mean? So the question is, were people 1,200 years old and 600? Or are those added up? Are those numerological codes too? I don't pretend to know, so I can't say. But so here's the three wise men, like when Jesus is born from the East, right? They come from the East. That's your thalamus, pineal, and pituitary glands, right? And the ladder or the spine, east, is upwards towards the brain. So east is always talking about up or to the right or to the east, as we talked about. So here's that art you were talking about on the left, the crown chakra on the head, the moon, and we talked about that. So the two serpents up the middle of that picture over here, that's the Kundalini channels wrapped around the spine, right? So that is overlaid. When I showed you the Kabbalistic Sephiroth with the middle and the two, that's not talking about this, but this is overlaid onto them, right? So you got the fire down here at the bottom. See the fire? And that's the Kundalini energy at your spine's base. And that's your red chakra. By the way, when you were talking about, remember that book, Women Come from Venus, Men Come from Mars?
Yeah.
What's Venus? What goddess was that? She's a goddess.
Yeah.
And Mars is male, the god of war. Men come from Mars, women come from Venus.
And they meet here in the middle on Earth. Yeah. Yeah,
they're talking about the male and female principles. So the fire is your energy. The Kundalini at the spine is the force used to push up the cerebral spinal fluid up the spine to get back up to the pineal gland. So you have to raise it, right? That's what Kundalini and you can do it through meditation, thought, or sex magic. Sexual rituals in these occult people, they're using the actual sacrum bone as a pump. Like, if you got a flat tire on your bike, you can either go to the gas station and pump it up, or you got the foot pump, the slow. That's that. You can do it through mind, or you can do it through an actual physical foot pump. And so, in the middle here, you see the caduceus and the rod of Asclepius. So those are symbols for raising the Kundalini energy to raise the Christos oil back to the brain, and it has healing properties, right? And it also activates dormant brain cells. It also regulates blood pressure and facilitates overall body regeneration, as we talked about with the cell salts.
This is why I think people lived longer, is because they were probably smarter and knew how to take better care of their body, due to this practice, and just had insights that, of course, they wouldn't eat the food that destroys them, or of course they wouldn't do the thing that makes their body wear out quicker, because they're more intelligent, because they're utilizing 100% of their brain. So they probably would live longer, I would think.
This is why, like, we're told, the oldest man, I saw the oldest man in Britain was 107, and he was cool. He was like me. He smoked every day for 100 years. He drank whiskey. He ran a marathon at 102 years old. But they tell us there are like Taoists out in the mountains we don't hear about in China and Tibet. They say they're like 250 years old, 200, that it's not. The oldest man in the world isn't 105. He's like 250.
Yeah.
Because they're doing this. They know this shit. This is, if you get into the Tao or the Tao, they're all about this, the cosmic orbit and tantric sex, right? This is what they're about. So here's your three wise men who come to see Jesus. On the right, you see the brain. These are just talking about the glands in the brain, the pineal, pituitary, and thalamus. So the thalamus gland is integral to our sensory perception and our consciousness, and dopamine, which we'll get into what the dopamine hits. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter. So it's a chemical messenger that transmits signals in our brain and other areas of the nervous system. And it plays a crucial role in functions like mood regulation, right? So that's why Facebook and TikTok, they're putting all these reels, YouTube as well. If you notice, there's YouTube reels now, and people are just scrolling like one after another, and you're getting this dopamine hit because it feels good. You're like addicted. You can't put it down because that gives you the idea of pleasure and reward. And then it gives you like motivation, pleasure, reinforcement. Dopamine also does motor control. So it's involved in our movement. So, you could take dopamine as an athlete. And producing neurons, I don't believe even are real, but but Parkinson's disease, which is characterized by tremors and difficulties. And then dopamine is your attention and learning, right? So it's essential for your cognitive functions, such as attention or learning. It's involved in what we call our reward system for influencing behavior. When we do something good, we get a dopamine hit and we say, oh, let's do that again. That feels good. And it's our sleep regulation. So this is why people are remember, people are like, I'm fucking tired. It's 9 at night and I'll just lay in bed and just look at a few Facebook things. And next thing you know, right? Aren't they up till 3 in the morning?
That's what people say. Yeah.
See what I mean? And they can do sleep. So that's what they're doing. That's why they're not tired. If you're going to bed, put your phone away. Because you're just getting dopamine hits and you're not going to sleep. You're going to be tired, right? And it's bad. So here's the thing, and most important on the left, imbalances in dopamine, which is what these are giving you, is dopamine hits constantly. You're not supposed to be on a constant dopamine hit. They've been linked to various neurological and psychiatric disorders. Are you wondering why everyone's fucking crazy? Too much dopamine activity is associated with schizophrenia, while too little is linked to Parkinson's and depression. Too much and too little can be anxiety, depression, anorexia, mental disorders, addiction, PTSD, and dementia. So now do people see why they're doing this shit to you? Right? Then you got the pineal gland, which is our melatonin, which is where we rejuvenate what we call our red blood cells, right? And counteract the aging process while also preventing the body's system from shutting down. That's why they're calcifying your pineal gland. They're trying to kill you early. Your pituitary gland is your serotonin, which is your blood, your mood stabilizer and your feelings of happiness, right? And then serotonin is in wound healing and toxin regulation through bowel control. So this is how, you don't have an immune system, but it's this: maintaining wakefulness, getting rid of depression, and regulating appetite and digestion. So you're not hungry all the time and you're digesting food. So do you see the elites know this, and these are the three glands that are under attack with all the food, the chemicals. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the
So on
constant
the
sex
right
in your
here,
face all the time. Yeah.
yeah. And the three wise men, traditionally known, I'm on the right now, they came to give Christ the gifts at his birth. They're the three glands. These are the three glands. So the gifts they come to give Christ are these.
Is that the
They came
frankincense
giving
and myrrh and all that?
frankincense, myrrh, and what was the other one? They're giving you melatonin, serotonin, and dopamine.
Wow.
Whatever it is, frankincense, myrrh, and I don't remember what the other one, So yeah, here's the land flowing with milk and honey. The pineal gland is the melatonin, as the honey. The pituitary gland is the serotonin, which is milk. And the blending of those two, as I said, the claustrum sends a neutral fluid into each of those glands on the way down. One electrifies them and one magnetizes it. See that?
Yeah.
Remember I talked about that?
Oil was the third thing that they brought.
Well, the oil is what
Frankincense, oil,
comes
and
down
myrrh.
from the claustrum, and then the pituitary gland and the other one, they electrify and magnify it.
Amazing.
So that's your milk and honey. Then it comes down the spine to regulate your body functions, right? So that's like we talked about. That's Santa Claus who comes down the chimney with all the presents.
And what's funny
Santa
is-
Claus is the claustrum.
Presence is, presence of mind. It's present in the moment. So that's interesting that gives you presence.
Yeah, that's
And
a good
presence
point.
to
Yeah.
Tartaria buildings and stuff.
Remember that movie Kung Fu Panda?
Hell yeah.
It's funny. He asked the master Sifu, I think, he's got that little mouse master. Master Sifu says, that's why it's called he's talking about the past or the future or the present. He said, that's why it's called the present, because it's the greatest gift.
It's a gift. Exactly. And this
So
is what this offers you is presence. Because if you're in this destabilized state, you're either in fear of what can happen by the media telling you all of these things, and we're in reactionary mode from a time that you're not present in. It's just a fictional thing that may exist at some point. Or you're in fantasy, thinking about something you're not experiencing now, attempting to recreate that fantasy in real time. But either way, you're not in a present moment. You're bringing something else to your now to then operate from that inexplicably non-existent moment. It's just fascinating.
Well, yeah, exactly. So let's look at these. So let's look at the thalamus and dopamine, right? That's your mood regulation, motor control, and attention and learning. So if you're not paying attention to right now, the present, you're either worried about what happened in the past, like the mystics all say, or you're worried about what might happen tomorrow. And we've all been there. And I have friends like this, like, their dad abused them or something. They're 50 years old now, and they're still talking about their dad abusing them when you're 7. You're like, that was 5 years ago. Like, get over it. He's not abusing you now. He's dead, so he's not going to abuse you. You see what I mean?
I tell those people to stop driving in the rearview mirror because you're going that way, but what you're doing is looking in the rearview mirror past things you've already passed behind you, and you're not going to be able to steer right if you're heading forward.
Right, exactly, yeah. And then, you've got the serotonin, which is the mood stabilizer. So that's what we talked about. It's very hard to be in the present when you're pissed off about what just happened to you, or you're scared about what's happening tomorrow, like the news scaring you, right? So it's very hard to be in the present. It's very easy to say, hey, man, you're living in the past. Stop looking in the rearview mirror and stop looking ahead. Just live in the now. You're like, that's easy for you to say. But what happens if you're actually fucking brain damaged and body damaged and nervous system damaged because you don't have these? See? It's easy to say, but doing it's like a totally different thing.
Yeah, simple, not easy. This realm is prolific with stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can get into this, the flaming sword, but the cherubim on top of the ark, Noah's ark, which is your head, the arch, the ark, and the ark of Freemasonry, you have the right and left brain hemisphere. That's your two cherubim sitting on the top of the tree of life, which one allegory is your spinal cord.
Oh, and I just noticed this. If you really look at it, the two hemispheres of the brain with the split look like wings from where they pivot at the pineal. They look like wings, like the cherubim wings that sit on top of the Hoover Dam. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those real cool Art Deco. Is that what it represents? Cherubim?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the two angels or angles sitting on your head. It's your left and right brain. And your job is to bring them together and balance them.
Holy
This is why musicians you'll notice a lot of truthers are musicians. Have you ever noticed that?
Oh, yes. I picked this up first year of the show, man. Actually, mine was with abductees, though. People who are dialed into this. I think abductee, paranormal, anything truth, anything like this taps into creativity and then unlocks that, which is, of course, a right hemisphere governed function. That's absolutely fascinating. I have
Yeah,
noticed
because
this so many-
playing music is a very right brain thing. As you know, you're a musician too, like me. So that is why it's happening is a lot of musicians already have been it's like weightlifting, If all you do is you're a math professor, you're weightlifting the shit out of your left brain, your critical analytical brain. If all you do is music, you're weightlifting the shit out of your right brain, if you're doing it properly and not worrying. Now, the cool thing about music is, as you know, there's a lot of left brain to learn the theory and it's
the math, the patterns, the geometry, that's all left brain. And so this is bringing the two together. And it's funny, you use the music and math, and then you think of dream theater and people who do math metal and stuff like that, where it's like, what is going on? It's a mathematical formula and frequencies. It's amazing, man.
Yeah, that's cool, isn't it? And then if you're into jazz and some more advanced music and stuff, you need a lot of left brain theory and, but you're not thinking that when you're playing. So it's a very good marriage. And that's why these jazz and classical musicians, they're really fucking smart because they have already done a discipline, an art form that has married these together. Yeah. So yeah, Noah's Ark is, the Ark of the Covenant, right? With the two cherubim sitting on top.
Yes.
It's a metaphor. There weren't people walking around Jericho like exploding walls down with a thing, right?
But the Ark allegedly also provided something called manna so that the Israelites could survive through the desert for 40 years, which only took it was a 9-hour walk, by the way, which is a fascinating study. If you just look at a map and do it. So what is that about? Were they able to sustain life physically without taking anything in due to their understanding of this ark? Was their mind just opened for this time period 100% just from some miraculous way, and so they were able to utilize it?
Well, the typology of that story comes from the British Isles.
Okay, so that would make
that's
more
why
sense.
It's a 9-day walk. But yeah, they're talking. Yeah. When's the last time you made it out in the desert for 40 years and didn't die of starvation or heat stroke or water, like a dehydration?
I mean, and after a year, you'd go, hang on, the sun's coming up here. Like somebody else would take over, right? And just sort of go, man, I'm going this way. This guy didn't know what he's doing.
Like, really? You didn't know how to walk east with the sun? Like, come on.
It's silly.
Right. Yeah. So this is, and then you get into Kundalini. We can probably stop soon here. Moses talks to the burning bush. Now, all this, the bush comes from the Yule tree in Druidicism. So these are allegories for the ash and the Yule tree, which is the old allegory for the tree of life, which is the allegory for what we've been talking about here. So, we could go 20 hours on this and we don't have to. But the Temple of Solomon. Now, here's what's going on in Israel. The Jews are claiming that the Dome of the Rock is built on top of the old Temple of Solomon in modern day Jerusalem, right? And we know what they're going to do is they're going to blow it up and blame it on Iran or whatever, because the Jews today want to rebuild the Temple of Solomon on top of the old Temple of Solomon. But the Muslim Dome of the Rock is sitting there and you're like, yeah, the Temple of Solomon is the temple of the sun and the moon, Solomon, the temple of the soul of man, your pineal gland sitting between your temple. So here it is. The Son of Man must be lifted up. The sun is the sun, soul is the soul, must be lifted up through Kundalini, activating the pineal gland. And that gives you the ability to start leaving the body and astral traveling at night. Gives you clairvoyant skills. Gives you the ability to meditate and go ask God what's going to happen, to see the future, right? So Moses, which is an Irish word mouse, meaning a wise man, teaches you that there are Kundalini energy to activate in the pineal gland, which gives you out-of-body abilities. So you're not just stuck in this trance coming around. And that's the story of Jesus. It's the alchemical process that occurs every month in the body, falls from heaven and incarnates on earth. The Christ falls into earth, which is the oil traveling down your spine, and the sacred oil stays down there for 3 days in the cave. And as we saw in the Zodiac, that's your December 21st. where the sun stops going and back up. So that's all this is talking about. It's just talking about this science of how the body works. This is how the ancients used to describe it.
Is this
That's
why?
it.
Is this why the scripture says that Jesus visits the house of each of his disciples? Is because each month it's in that fluid is going to be in that house, essentially, is where the moon will be in your sign.
On one level,
and each of those houses represents one of the disciples, right?
right, on one level, and then on another level, when you say Jesus is the Son, well, then he visits all the houses of his disciples all throughout the year.
I'm thinking the
because
Christ oil context, though, is that the Christ oil would then descend to Earth once a month, but each month it would be representing a different sign or in a different sign, and then therefore that would be representing a different disciple. So he visits each of his disciples. And I'm wondering if there are characteristics that lie in congruency with the disciples and what occurs to you physically, sort of like how the tissue salts allow you to 12 different options to release it month. I wonder if there's different Christ oil configurations that you experience due to the different months, maybe, or Jesus visiting these different disciples.
Yeah, there are, because just like in the ground, right, there are different purities of oil. So you can dig oil up in Canada or, in Texas, and you can dig it. The reason they want Saudi Arabian oil is because it doesn't need to be refined. It's fucking pure. You know what I'm saying? That's why they want Middle East oil is because it's not black. It's like pure oil. Same thing. We don't just have an oil in our body. We have oils, many kinds,
right,
for different needs of different parts of the bodies. Yeah, you've totally nailed it.
Dude, it seems like it would conglomerate with those oils that they're expressed, grab it with it, bring it up through the sacrum, or those gases perhaps then end up in the pineal in some way, and then that particular oil based on that month is then now infused in the Christ oil as well, and then you get a coherency, right? You get this, wow, it's just interesting, Steve. You just made me think so much, dude.
Yeah. So we'll just, I think we're almost like, we don't want to go too.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here. We're going to book so many of these things, dude. Please.
But this is why when you hear stories like, the story of Jesus is the same story as the story of Krishna and Brahma and, 16 crucified saviors. And it really came from Ireland, and the Druids brought this east, actually, which is why the stories are all the same. But every place has their own spin on it. So, this is your Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. That's soul, mind, and body, or Israel, Isis, Ra, and El, soul, mind, and body. So the mind is the serpent because it symbolizes knowledge. It is the intellect that connects the soul to the body. And this is why the mind is in the middle here. You see Vishnu's always in the middle because mind comes from the mind. There's the physical body, the etheric, and then mind. All is light. All is mind. Everything comes from the mind of God. All is light. That's why it's in the middle, because it projects into what we call physicality later. Brahma has multiple faces on him. If you look at Brahma, see all these heads around him, symbolizing the soul taking on different bodies. This is reincarnation. It's dimensional. Jesus Christ, body, Christ consciousness. That's what I told you earlier. Freemasons don't say Jesus Christ. They say Christ Jesus, because they say the consciousness comes first. Christ is over the body. Right. But this is your Trinity, soul, body, and mind. And I think we can stop there. We can get into the third eye or pineal gland, but
I'm going to write third eye, and we're going to pick up there next time. This is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible, Steve. Again, I'm just... Okay, so integration is necessary, and that's how this goes. So we're going to wrap it up for this particular episode on this particular topic. But guys, all the ways to find him located down below, as well as his first episode. You're going to want to build from that if you haven't seen it yet. Definitely check that out. And we are going to go into this afterthought because we have some sacred geometry and electroculture to talk about in garden mazes. This is one of the coolest damn things ever. You blew my mind with your background here. Star forts, garden mazes. You met some folks at Liber Poco, which we're also going to talk about, that do this thing. And so, dude, Steve, just could not be more grateful for you and our experience. Before we let you run for this one, tell us what gets you out of bed every morning, brother.
Tell us what? About what?
What gets you out of bed every morning, keeps you moving?
Well, I actually don't. I get out of bed late morning because I'm up late as a musician. But no, I just get into this. And this is what this is all about, is like, you see, I was talking to Felix about this, actually. It's like, Why? How come no one hears about this yet? There are Rosicrucians and Theosophists and Masons, and there are these people out here who have this, and yet most of us have never heard about any of this shit, right? And you're like, where are these pockets of people? I'm fascinated in, like, yeah, I'd love if you got Dr. Robert Gilbert on and said, like, where the fuck did you run across this from when you were a kid? How are you people finding this stuff? And it is hidden to us. So to me, I am fascinated in the wonder of this. And just, again, to refrain, as you know, you can see I'm smoking, drinking. Just because I know this science doesn't mean I'm totally practicing it all the time either. You know, I practice it sometimes, which is why I told you I take the cell salts, because I live the prodigal son life, which is counteractive to what I'm showing you all. So there's a difference between knowing this and applying this. I don't want people to think like I'm holier than thou. I'm the same as all of you. It's just that I know about this. And that's what we talked about with the thieves on the left and the right. I know I'm on the Luciferian side, but because I know this, I do have a chance to turn. Whereas if you're listening to the other fuckheads who are telling you that there was a big bang and just planets just formed out of nothing and it's in an nothing, something is expanding into nothing, and gases are, you know, just like, and monkeys, fish crawled out of the sea and became monkeys and did this. If that's where you're at, you're fucked. Because you are, and the same on the other side. If all you want to do is get a light body, this place sucks so bad, I want a light body and I'm going to evaporate into light and never come back here again. You don't get it either. You see, that's the other side of it. That's the total Luciferian side of it. Oh, the Buddhists are just going to meditate for 50 years and evaporate out of here. You're like, you're missing the point of here. I always notice, I'd like to ask you about this in the after hours. The people I know who want to get out of here aren't having a good time here. I don't know anyone who's having the fun time I am, who's looking to turn into a rainbow. Have you ever, like...
Just want to take a moment here and thank that amazing dude, Steve Falconer, for coming by and just dropping knowledge and just shooting ropes of dope shit all over this thing. Thank you so much, Steve, man. We really appreciate you. You are quite the Hugh man, and you are a badass. So check all the ways to find him down in the show description, guys. If you want to join us for this afterthought, the link is down below on how to do that. It's an awesome way to support your favorite show. We absolutely go balls deep on the geoarchitecture, star forts, bells, crop circles, all kinds of shit, man. So highly recommend you check that thing out. And again, a wonderful way to support your favorite show here. So guys, want to remind you that all the links down below can find the guest, find all the cool stuff we're doing with the publishing house, with the new journals, with all kinds of stuff, man. These things are being published like crazy. We're up to book 9 now, just published. So grateful. Continue to check those things, and we're honestly grateful for your support, going over there and just ranking the books and stuff like this, liking the videos, sharing stuff. I mean, it means a lot, guys, honestly. So thank you very much, and keep moving forward. Weird times and stuff like that, so I will of course remind you, not that you need it, but I'll go ahead and remind you to just move out into this beautiful weird ass place that we call home for the time being, and be nice to everybody that you come across. Pick up a piece of litter if you see it blown around the realm there. Get the fuck out of the left-hand lane if you've got somebody behind you wanting to pass, and above all and anything else, go out into this beautiful realm and just be good to one another. Thank you so much for watching, listening, subscribing, sharing, doing all the cool things that help folks like me amplify the message here. We'll see you next time.